And we're back. It's COMP397. It's week 3, lesson 3, part 1. And we're talking about assignment 1. We're into week 3 and we're talking about assignment 1. And typically I would have given you this assignments earlier, like last week. But last week, I really had to get into the nitty-gritty of TypeScript and Visual Studio. We did a bit of Visual Studio Code first week, and you still can use that. We're not going to do it today. But what I'm going to talk about today is assignment 1. And we're going to use a different framework for this today. And it's not because I don't want you to do it with Create.js. In fact, I'd like you to try it with Create.js if you can. If you're ambitious. If you're an ambitious person, you want to try it with Create.js, all the power. But I'm going to show you a way of doing it quick and dirty to get it done. And then afterwards, we'll talk about other options. So let's get into the assignment, right? It's called The Dragon, or Document the Dragon, right? Let me turn the lights off. So what is this thing anyway I want you to build? What do I want you to build here? So I've got this, the Dragon game site files. They're up on GitHub. So let's go and find where those are. So if I go to github.com and I go to Centennial, you'll see that further down here I have, like way down in the dumps here, I have the Dragon, which is should be in here. Let me see. Did I not put it inside? I may have not. Let's see how. Maybe it's going to be under my other account. Let's try. Sorry, apologize about that. Don't know what happened there. Let's try this one. How about that one? And then go down to repositories and skim all the way down to where there should be the Dragon. There it is, the Dragon. Right. Now, what I'm asking you to do, right, is you can fork this thing, right? So if you go to my last name as an example, so github.com/my last name and then the Dragon, right? You'll be able to get this little template going, right? Now, what it does is it uses a different framework called Impress.js, and we're going to talk about that a little bit for how this thing runs. Okay, I've got a so this is a template that you can use for Visual Studio. That's why I've kind of introduced it. So I'm going to kind of kick off Visual Studio 2013 here. Make sure I don't have it still running good. And I'm going to actually, what I'll do is I'll do it the other way around. I'll kind of kick off. There's many ways you can do this, and of course my Windows 10 in the Mac gives me a little bit of trouble at times. It likes my Retina display, and then sometimes it doesn't. One day they'll fix it. I'm okay with it. I just suffer through the whole thing, the whole experience. It's a suffrage. You know, you have to go through the suffering a little bit. So I've got, let me see if it's this one here. So I want to make sure I give you the right stuff. No, it's not that one. Let's look at this one. Yes, it is. This is the one. All right, so I have the example files already downloaded, and it's way down here called the Dragon, so COMP397. Of course, if you ask me to find them, that would be, you know, impressive. Mail pilot, there it is. There we go. And under the Dragon, this is done, you know, a couple years back. Right, so what am I getting you guys to do, and what is this thing? Let's take a look at what I've got so far. And again, this runs Impress.js, which is kind of a deprecated library, but it doesn't matter. It's not because I want you guys, you know, not to use Create.js. We'll talk about it a little bit. I want to give you the gist of what this thing can do, right? So you see what the advantage of using this framework would have been if we were going to, you know, continue to use something like this. But think about it as like a kind of Prezi that we control. I don't know if you guys know what Prezi is. It's like a presentation framework that runs on Flash, right? But instead of a presentation running on Flash, they actually have you know, a very simple presentation framework they built with JavaScript. So let's take a look and see what it does. So I'm going to run this thing. So it looks like it runs this. You're on a planet full of dragons, Stephen. Right? In front of you, you see 2 caves. Right? In one cave, the dragon is friendly and will share his treasure with you. And the other dragon is greedy and hungry and will eat you on sight. Which cave do you go into? Cave 1 or cave 2? Cave 2, right? Oh, you cheated. You looked at the rules. Huh? It's very cool. So that you approach the cave, it's bright and cheerful. A large white dragon approaches you and gives you his treasure, right? So we start over. And if we go to cave 1, you see that it's just a slide framework or whatever. So I'm going to go to cave 1. You approach the cave, it's dark and spooky. A large red dragon jumps out in front of you. He opens his jaws and gobbles you down in one bite, right? So a couple of options. So this is the basic that I want you to use, kind of the basic framework. But what I really want to do with this one is use it as a jump-off point for whatever we're doing. So let's take a look. It says here that we're going to build out this game a little bit more. So it says, using the Dragon game site files provided on GitHub as your template, create both an internal and external document for the site. Ensure you follow documentation best practices and use the external documentation template provided, which I put up on Dropbox there, right, in eCentennial. Currently, the site only gives the player the choice of going into cave 1 or cave 2, right? And Stephen is correct. He's figured out that cave 2 is the winning cave, right? Or one overall decision level or node, if you will, right? So one node. Extend the functionality of the site to include 2 more decision levels for the player. An example would be like this. After going into the cave 1, which is, you know, the losing cave, the player is given the option to turn right or turn left, the second decision level. He chooses left and proceeds to the inner cave, where he chooses to fight the dragon and try to convince the or convince the dragon to save his life, the third decision level. Which one is he going to do? Fight or try and please don't kill me, right? Which one is it going to be? And this little map is what I've kind of drawn out. So let's kind of focus in there to understand what I'm trying to say here. So your first decision level is go left or go right, right? Kind of stuff, right? Choice 1 or choice 2. Choice 2 is obviously right now the path of positive outcomes, right? That's what I kind of call it, right? On the left, right, it's the path of negative outcomes. All bad things can only happen on the left. No matter what you do, no matter what choice you make, you're dying, right? In fact, what I want you guys to do is I want you to come up with 7 negative outcomes, right, in your storyline, right? But only 1 positive outcome, right? But make that positive outcome fixed. So don't make it random or whatever. Just make it a fixed positive outcome. If they choose the right path, and you can make it as squirrely as you want, right? It'll get you to outcome 8, and then that 8th outcome or whatever outcome, maybe you want to call it outcome 1, in your case, the winning outcome. That's the only winning outcome. You can't have in your game, this is the rule, all right? You can't have more than 1 positive outcome. The rest, every other time, no matter how descriptive you get, no matter how hard they work, they face death in the form of, and fill in the blank, okay? Or they lose the game. If you don't want to kill players because that's not your style, you want to make a more family-friendly game, you can do that too. And you don't kill anybody, but you trap them and they have to start the game over, okay, whatever. Or they just lose. They didn't do the right things. What I don't want is what I just showed you. This little thing that I'm showing you with the dragon, right, is really a template. So I've gotten templates back just like this one that looks exactly like this with some different text. That's not what I want. I'm not talking about don't give me the dragon back. Don't make a story about dragons also. I want to kind of limit you a little bit. If you're going to do it, make a story about space dragons or whatever, something else, right? Make up your own bloody story, all right? Whatever. But the thing is, it's your story. What I want you to do, and a lot of people, what they do in previous lessons, previous submissions is they added some descriptive images, right, into the background, right? So you can make this thing look like you like. More than 2 buttons, right? They've added some other functionality like carrying an inventory, right? Some other things to make this game into a kind of a decent game, right? Some people have added a score where, depending on how deep in the levels you go, the higher the score you get, right? Even if you lose, you still get a score, right? And if you win, of course, you get a higher score, right? It's kind of the end of the road. Some people have gone beyond the 3rd decision level, the decision node, and some people have gone, for some places, deeper, and other places more shallow in terms of their decision matrix. Think about this as almost a behavior that you're trying to follow. If this was an AI, left to right, forward or back, and it was random which one they were going to go, it almost gives you the ability to create an artificial or almost like heuristic system, to kind of go right and left, forward and back, all that kind of stuff. So why are we doing this one? Why this one in this kind of stage? Why not make you do it with Create.js? Because we're going to focus on that. In fact, I'm going to talk about, instead of using Impress.js, which is what the framework is here, and starting off with this initial functionality and just adding to it, instead of doing that, what I'm going to be talking about is using Create.js to create a state machine today. So we make a state machine, we make some buttons, And instead of this create.js where it kind of slides in, it'll actually swap your screens to the next screen. So then you can make as many of these play states as you like. Play level 1, play level 2, play level 3. And it's going to help you if you do it that way on the create.js side. Now we'll give you bonus marks for it. It'll help you with your assignment number 2, your assignment number 3, your final project, and all that kind of stuff. I'll give you an option to do it. But the main focus of this, if you notice where all the marks are going, the main focus of this is I want you to create your story. I want you to document your game, understand how to document well, create your game design document, which is what you're going to be doing. That's the main focus of this. And if you notice the mark distribution, 14 marks for functionality, 12 marks for internal documentation, so comments, 10 marks for external documentation, and 4 marks for GitHub version control. Okay, so using GitHub and all that kind of stuff. This game's got to be deployed live. Okay, so again, you can choose wherever you want to put it, Azure, GitHub pages, whatever. A lot of the stuff that we use can work on any of those frameworks. You can choose another cloud host like Heroku, DigitalOcean, whatever you like, right? It's up to you. And again, by now you should have that student pack. I talked about the student pack from DreamSpark. Let's go there. And the student pack from DreamSpark for GitHub gives you like those 5 private repos. It gives you, here it is right here. It gives you 5 private repos, an SSL certificate, a free domain name from Namecheap for a year, a bunch of different things. I highly recommend you go and get this pack if you haven't got it already. It's kind of cool. That's one. And the other thing is, of course, this Microsoft Azure stuff. And if you haven't done that already, we've talked about this a couple times now. Go get signed up for Microsoft Azure. It's free for students, especially if you make web apps and all that stuff. It's really convenient. And it's a good technology to put on your resume, right? So that's why I fully encourage you to do that. Okay, let's get back. So that's kind of what I'm looking for. So it's more around documentation, if you notice anything else. So let's look at this. So from a functionality perspective, here's the functionality piece, because part of it's functionality. It's got to work, right? So even if it's non-functional, look at the documentation, internal and external, are worth more than the actual functionality in this assignment. So that's where the focus is, documenting what you do, right? And planning. It's around planning and documentation, planning your game out before you actually write some code. Because if you don't do this later on, you're going to write yourself into a black hole with more complex games, and you're not going to be able to do it, right? So this is what this assignment's all around. So again, each decision level, so I had 2 decision levels of the game for a total of 8 possible outcomes, like I said. See decision tree diagram above, like I showed you, right? Each decision level will allow the player at least 2 choices. So it means you can go, if I go right and left, so I go left, I can go right and left again. And if I go left again, I can go right and left again, right? So 3 decision levels, right? Only 1 positive outcome is possible for the player. That's worth 2 marks. So if somehow you make, in this particular case, if you make more than 1 positive outcome, you lose marks. You'll lose a couple marks from that, right? Because that's not what I asked you to do. If you don't make as many choices as I've asked you to do, the less choices you make, the more marks you lose. Like you have to make it, kind of build it out a little bit at the bare minimum. Here's an option. You may allow the player to go back to the previous node or cross laterally to a node on the same level. So you see a side door, you take it, and you go to the next node. So now, even though he entered the path of death, right? He can worm himself back into the path of positive outcomes by going across nodes, right? That's also something you might want to try and do. It's more complex, and it's not going back on your browser that I'm asking you to do. That's not the answer. That's not the solution. I'm talking about buttons that allow you to go cross laterally, right? Option 2, you may allow the player to find special items to help him win, which is where you get a little bit more. These are bonus items that allow you to do this, okay? And again, option 3 is, instead of using the Impress.js framework that you're going to be given, or a library, use Create.js instead, which is what we're going to be focusing on. That's going to be more points. If you do Create.js, I think and I'll show you how to do some of that today, it'll help you. Again, this thing is due next week, Friday at midnight, right? So you only have a week to get this done. So you got to script it out pretty quick. Include an internal documentation for your program. Ensure you have include the program header that indicates the source file name, author's name, last modified by. Please don't skip any of these sections. If you skip a section, you lose marks. It's simple, right? 6 marks. I'm asking for 6 things. If you forget to put in the program description, you lose a mark. It's pretty simple, right? Ensure your program uses contextual variable names that help make the program human readable. So if you make X's and Y's, they got to be coordinates, right? Ensure you include inline comments that describe the conditional structure you will use for your decision tree matrix. So show me the nodes. So say this is node 1. This is the first decision tree. This is a negative outcome, you know, or whatever. This is path of negative outcomes. Make some marks. So if I read your code, I can see, okay, I see what he's doing here, right? I know where this is going, right? Here's your external document, a company logo. Now, some people may say, whoa, company logo, man. I'm not a designer. What are you talking about now? And I've asked you guys to do this already on the game side. So it's going to be good for you guys on the non-game side. And when you guys do your document, right, I want the logo to be your own. I don't want you to steal a logo from somebody else and slap your name on it or something like that. Like, do a very simple one. It could just be a stylized version of your first name and last name or something like that, like your first initials and last initials, you know, as an example. That's okay. Maybe your middle initial too. Throw that in there. Ooh, right? Make it even more special. With a little bit of text, or add some color or some kind of shape, like a hexagon. Hexagon's very popular this year, right? Just putting it out there. A table of contents, right, which is included in the external document. I'm going to go there in a second. Version history, and when I mean version history is kind of show me your commits, right? That's kind of the easiest way to do this. You can also name each of your versions of your code, like version 0.01, version 0.02, right? And for every major release, you can do version 1, version 2. And for major updates, you can do version 0.1, version 0.2, version 0.3 until you get to your final release, right? Sometimes we go from 0.3 to 1, right? Because you're done. You're not going to do any more, right? A detailed game description. So what is this game about? It's not just choose your own adventure game. I don't want you to say, this is a choose your own adventure game. You know, this is a game, and you describe the story a little bit. That's what I'm looking for. Describe what you're, you know, where you do. I don't need this whole story. I don't even need you to script it out or, you know, put stuff in there. I wouldn't mind if you showed me your one of these as part of your external document. And again, we can use a mind map to do that. I think I've shown you a mind map, but I'll show it to you again as a tool that you can use to help you make that, right? Share your GitHub files. If you just populate your stuff, yeah?
Do you want the same outcome in the same location over and over?
No. Oh, no, yeah, I'm not expecting you to do it randomly, right? But it has to make sense. Like, you can't just go, well, I went left and I went over the cliff and now I'm saved. That doesn't make sense. It has to be, if it's shifting, there's got to be a reason. It has to make sense that it shifted over here, right, to another location, like a random location. Almost like, you know, the choices are turn left to go down dark cave, turn right to go into a bright meadow, and then the next time is turn left to go to a dark cave, turn right to go onto the cliffs of despair, right? Which one do you go to, right? And then another choice would have been turn right to go to the bright meadow, because that whole block goes into another node, right? And it's kind of down that path. You can't go find yourself in, you know, in the winning location just randomly like that. That's not right. And it'll mess players up too. It'll you know, you want to look for the bright meadow. You know, that's the one you want to look at, because that's going to get you to win eventually, kind of thing, right? I highly recommend in the beginning you don't make it random. That's what I recommend. Get it working, and then once you get your minimum viable product, your MVP, right? Once you get that working and it's good, then you start modifying and adjusting it and making it more random and so on. So get that first piece going, and then, you know, modify it to your heart's content. Okay. And the other thing I was asking is, if you're going to go deeper than the levels that I talked about, like I only asked for these, right? And some people say, well, what if I add down here where outcome 5 is another one of these nodes that goes this way? Can I do that? Sure, you can. This is the minimum amount that I want. This is what this is what the bare minimum that I'm asking for, right? The more complex you make it, have fun with it. Like, you can make it as complex as you want, but it's got to be fun, right? Some people add music, like, you know, there's all kinds of stuff you can do with it to make it more like a game and less like a slideshow. Okay, because that's what it is right now, just a simple slideshow. All right, for GitHub, if you just put stuff up on GitHub, just put it up there and never use GitHub again, 2 marks. You lose 2 marks right away, right? Because GitHub's got to be, you got to have some commits. You should probably commit every major you know, modification. If you hit a milestone, you know, as an example, you should probably commit. You go home for lunch, you should probably commit. You go, you know, you wake up in the morning, you know, and you do some work, commit. You know, do some commits, a bunch of them, to make sure that it makes sense if you make some changes. And usually it's like on a resting place, when you change something, when you added something, those kind of things is when you want to commit, so you don't lose your changes. I would say commit and push often. All right, don't just do it once in a while. You know, I'm not saying that, you know, you want to do 100 commits either. It's got to make sense. It's just got to be, you know, more on a regular basis. That means I want to see that you're actually using GitHub the way it should be used, as a way of showing progression for your project, and worst case scenario, stepping back if you make a mistake, right? So that's what I want to see. So that's where you get your full 4 marks, right? Again, for your submission, I want you to push up your external document and a link to your project files on GitHub. And remember that this whole project has to be live on some site somewhere, and you got to give me the link to that, all right? So that's the kind of the other proviso here. So how do I make this thing anyway? Like if I was gonna put this, or if I was gonna start planning for the game, and I want to add my plan into my document, where would I go? And there's some really cool free resources that I highly recommend. If I go to, let's see if I can find this thing. There's a really cool mind map tool that I like to use. It's called bubble.us, and you might have seen this before, maybe not. If I go to start brainstorming, right? It starts me off with this little node, right? Like this, right? So then I can start typing in, here's my new mind map. I can start typing in the thing. So, you know, this is the initial cave. Let's say if I was going to redo my game, initial cave. And I'm sorry if it's hard for you to see. I'm just trying to make it so that, let's see if I can zoom in a little bit. My initial cave, there it is. And then what we have down here is these 2 points here. And this is just an online tool. You can subscribe to it, whatever. For the most part, it's free. There's certain things that you can do with it, and certain things you can't, unless you actually pay. But there's stuff that you can do, like you know, screen capture. You know, at the very minimum to use. You know, I think you're only allowed 1 mind map. One thing you can do is move these things around. So let's say, for example, I start typing in, you know, I go left, you know, left, and then what happens to if I go left, and if I go right, there's my right. So what happens when, and I can describe these choices, right, left, or right. And if you notice, if I go left, you know, what happens? Well, I get this thing where I get gobbled down, right? That's the choice. And down here, this is the 2 outcomes here, because this is my decision levels I made so far, right? And the other one is when, you know, dragon gives treasure, dragon's treasure, right? So that's what I get. So I get these 2 choices. This I lose. This is my, you know, path of loss kind of stuff, because that's all I choose. I'm going to go left or right now. This is my initial game. Well, for you, you want to break this out a little bit. So left cave or right cave, right? So this is left cave or right cave. But instead of being losing or winning, right? Maybe you want to go and in my left cave or right cave, as an example, instead of being gobbled down, that's not cool. Let's add in another possibility here. So I'll add in a couple of choices. Don't show this again. Yeah, because it's saying to save your stuff, don't lose your stuff. That's what we're saying. So then we'll say up, climb up a mountain, and then I'm just going to go a little bit smaller for you guys to see this. Climb up mountain. The other one, and the other choice is I can go, let's make this one over here. Just bear with me while I do this. And then go deeper, right? That's one of the choices you have, deeper into the cave system, in the left cave. And I want to make this one part of this one, right? That's what I wanted to do. So you get, if you go climb up the mountain, you know, you go out there and the dragon gobbles you down, right? Kind of stuff, because he's waiting on the mountainside, and he finds you and eats you, right? And then, so you know, he eats you this one. If you go deeper, you know, as an example, this is just another 2 decision levels instead of 3. You know, you drown, right? Because there's some kind of you lose a brick and water rushes into the cave and you drown, right? So again, it's another lose scenario, right? So you can kind of map out your story before you actually do any kind of coding or any kind of documentation. And so why would you think that this is a good idea to do this kind of thing? Anybody have an idea? What do you think? I know this looks obvious, but like for some of you, you might say, this is a lot of work. Like I got to plot out my story. I got to do stuff. It's almost like I'm doing cue cards when I'm writing my screenplay. Like how come it's so complex, right? What do you think?
It's really easy to lose track of what connects to what, start adding multiple levels.
It does. It does do that. But the other thing is, further than that, this is a great way to track your different states. You're moving from one state to another, one level to another, one scene to the next, right? And you want to understand all the scenes in your game, and you can make it as complex or as easy as you want. Now, what I've asked you to do is make it semi-complex. Like you're going to 3 decision levels, you've got 8 outcomes. It's pretty good. But imagine a real, kind of this whole idea of a pseudo open world game where you have a bunch of side quests, and this could be one of them, right? How do you win the side quest? Well, he's in the deepest dungeon, right? So one way to do it is actually map the dungeon out, right? So you can actually physically take a map of the dungeon, map it out with squares or whatever, and then decide what creature is where, as an example. And then how does it go down? Does he have to go down a set of stairs? Does he have to go up? Like physically draw it out. Sometimes that helps as well. Not just write it down like this, right? Again, you can make it as complex as possible, right? Or as easy as you want. But the more you put in here, right, the more, more detail you have. So when you start to code, you're like, this is getting really complex. Maybe I gotta, before you code, you're like, maybe I gotta take this whole section out, right? Instead of, oh man, I'm going down this rat hole, and I'm never gonna finish my project, which is due next Friday. Like we don't have like weeks. This is 1 week, right? So don't go crazy on this thing. This is around documentation. This is around planning, because I want the same kind of documentation and planning. This is the setup for you guys, and the payoff is going to be after you know how to do your documentation and planning. You're going to use it every time we do an assignment. So assignment 2, assignment 3, assignment 4. They're all going to have this documentation and planning involved. So that's why I'm introducing it to you now, right? So you get it done. Any questions around this stuff? I know it looks like, I'm trying to make it fun. Do you know what I'm saying? There is some really good reasons to do this kind of thing. For the people that are on the game side, there's nothing wrong with doing the same kind of planning and everything else on the game side. If you figure out how to do this stuff, put together a game document, and I can't talk about that all in Unity because I don't have time. Like I'm scripting, so I'm running, right? And imagine if I had this level of complexity too. This is too much. But here we have a little bit more time. And then in other courses, they're going to talk about the game design document process on the people who are doing COMP305. There's some other courses, I think COMP394 or some other one that Narendra's doing, Professor Narendra. And he's the one that's going to come up with, he's going to talk about game design document a little bit more. All right, so that's what this thing is. And I wanted to talk about, so once you get this done, how does it work, and where do you get the Impress.js framework? How do you get to understand what the slides do and all that kind of stuff? So if I looked up Impress.js, that's one thing I need to look up, right? And if I go here to Impress.js, right, you see that what it says here, right? So it's github.com Impress/Impress.js tree master. You can fork this one to make it part of your own folder. This is the actual framework that was written by this guy Bartaz, right? He's the guy that came up with this framework, and he talks about how to use it. And he says, "Look, use the source, Luke." Right? That's what he's saying. And the source is actually the CSS files and everything else. If you click on the CSS files, he's got a bit of a a Yoda example here, right? He's drawing it out with ASCII art, right? And then as you go down, it says, so you'd like to know how to use it, and then it's just documented. So actually the HTML that he's got in here actually documents how to use the whole framework. So if you actually read the documentation, that's part of it. It tells you how to target how your slides work, how they move from one side to the other, how to mark up your code to make them all go, and everything else. For example, this slide says my Y coordinate. Where's the Y? Remember, it's down, right? The Y coordinate is minus 1500, so it's like, probably way up or way down. And that's what this thing does. If you actually do this little demo, if you download the code, it does a couple of other things, which is kind of cool. And they teach you how to do it if you just follow the example. So there's data Y3000. So you literally put slides way off screen, right? And then all you're doing is bringing them back into view when you click onto them. So they actually slide them into view and slide the other ones out. And they do this all with JavaScript, all right? So so it's kind of cool. And if you do the demo, right? So we go back here, right? So here's the official demo. So if I go let's do this together. So I'll show you what it does. Here's the official demo for it. And it says use the space bar or arrow keys to navigate. So we'll do arrow keys. So aren't you just bored with all those slides-based presentations? Yeah. Don't you think that presentations given modern browsers should copy the limits of classic slide decks? Would you like to impress your audience with stunning visualization of your talk? Sure, sure, sure. Now see how it does. So it actually gives you a little bit of that, the same kind of flash-like effect. Then you should try Impress.js, right? And then it kind of pivots the whole thing. It's a presentation tool inspired by the idea behind Prezi. And then boom, it rotates again. Visualize your big thoughts, and then boom, and tiny ideas. And you see how it goes into 3 dimensions. This allows you to do that, rotating and scaling. And then the only limit is your imagination. And you want to know more, use the source, Luke. Hey, by the way, did you notice that it's all in 3D, right? So you can actually do this stuff. So it actually uses some CSS classes that allow you to move things in faux 3D and all this kind of stuff. So it kind of makes it neat. So beat that Prezi. And I kind of like it because from an organizational perspective, this, if you look at this from a very high level, it's not a bad little framework. Is it something that makes sense for us to use for a game, to make a whole game? No. But it's a great starter to understand how to move from one story point to the next. So if you're going to make a storyboard and you want to move from one storyboard piece to the next, and this is what we're kind of making, right? We're making kind of a storyboard with words, or plotting out a. Think about these as like a traditional way of making a screenplay. How would we do it, right? We plot out the story, and I'm not going to go too much into story, right? Because we just don't have time. That's one thing I don't have time to do. It's kind of out of scope, how to make a story. But think about this: a story always has, or a narrative has, a beginning, middle, and an end. You want to kind of have a hook for the for your player or the reader, if there's a reader, or the person who's watching the movie. The audience has to be hooked in within the first 10 minutes, right, of play. And then afterwards, they're hooked. They've got some kind of challenge. Whether they want to or not, they're going to be pushed into it, because this is the way we're going to push them in. And then they're going to have a series of tests. And after they go through a series of tests, they're going to fight the boss monster. And finally, they're going to win, right? And that's the end. It seems like it's like very simple and easy. But the basic thing is this: we always want to take the hero or the user from an area of the kind of the old world. This is who you are. Maybe, classic is, and I'll talk a little bit about story here, is Luke Skywalker. If we look at Luke Skywalker, so if you're a Star Wars fan, and I know Star Wars is coming out this year. Star Wars is the classic story of a young boy. He's a farmer. He doesn't know anything, but he's got interesting genetic history, right? We don't know about it at the beginning. But his father is Darth Vader, right? We don't know this. It's all backstory. And he meets an old man, the old man that he's been dealing with for a long time. And you know what? There's a challenge. The world is getting worse, and the old man is trying to draw him into this bigger world. He resists. No, I can't do it. I got to take care of my mom's farm, or my uncle's farm. I can't do it. So he resists the call to adventure first at the beginning, right? And then finally, his mom's farm or his uncle's farm is destroyed by the stormtroopers. So now he's pushed into doing it, whether he likes to or not. So the hero is propelled into the story, whether he wants to or not. And finally, he's in the story. He's learning how to use the Force. He's on the Millennium Falcon. He's meeting Han Solo and Mos Eisley Spaceport and all that that whole scene. He doesn't really want to do it. He's reluctant. He's kind of a do-gooder and everything else. And then he keeps learning about the Force and learning about himself until finally he's the main guy who's able to destroy the Death Star and kind of defeat the enemy and go home, kind of like a hero, right? So he goes from this farm boy, here's a transformation, right, to hero at the end of the story. And it's almost like he becomes the master of both worlds. Now he's not just a farm boy, but he also is a rebel. He's going to be part of the Rebel Alliance, which eventually is going to become the New World Order, right? Or New Galactic Empire, or whatever you want to call it at the end. The New Republic is what it's called, actually, right? So that's the that's the way it is. So again, going from the old world to the new world, starting off not knowing anything and eventually becoming master of both worlds, right? That's what we want to make the hero. That's what we want to do with our user, the player, right? We want to make him start off not knowing the world, give him a bit of training sessions, right? Train him with a bunch of tests, and then finally get him to fight the boss monster when he's tough enough, right? Maybe or when he's good enough, because you've trialed him through a bunch of levels, right? And then finally he's won, right? Some games make it so it's continual, so you never win, right? It just keeps getting harder and harder, right? Which gets really annoying, but that's how it goes. So think about this. We're doing almost like a storyboard with slides. So that's all I really want to say about this assignment. Any questions? Again, this is due next week. I've given you the Impress.js framework to look at. I've given you my examples on GitHub as a starting point, and some tools to use to map it out, right? The design document, as well as you know, the some kind of code templates to start off, right? But what I want to try and do the next piece, right? I'm going to just stop the video now for a second and go into the next piece and start talking about the idea of state machines, okay, and what those things are and why we want to try and do this, right, with Create.js, which would be the really awesome thing to do, and why I would ask you to try this instead. So let's just stop the video now and we'll go to the next piece.